My pleasure to host this exciting panel. I'm delighted to have three fantastic founders here and cover such a broad range of solutions, including seeds, fertilizer, and water. Really important issues. I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists. Brendan Collins is co-founder and CEO of Avalo AI, a startup that is using machine learning and AI to design climate-resilient crops. Their technology simulates changes in plant genomes. Basically, it enables researchers to find and breed desirable traits like heat and drought resistance in 2 to 3 years instead of the usual 15 years. They have raised 3 million so far. Our second panelist is Franco Martinez Levis, the co-founder and CEO of Puna which uses extremophiles to help crops adapt to dry, salty, degraded soils of the near future. Extremophiles are microbes that thrive in extreme conditions, which means that these are microbes that can be used to produce biofertilizers, increase crop yields, and protect crops from extreme weather. Puna has raised 3.7 million to date. Then our third panelist is Dr. Ramadan Borayek. He is the CTO and co-founder of Drip.ai, developing a hydropanel that harvests water from thin air at utility scale. The technology is passive, meaning it doesn't require energy inputs, and it yields up to 5 times cheaper water than tap water. The company is based in Singapore and has received seed funding so far. On the Red to Green podcast, I usually start out with the red part, the problem, to then go to the green part, the solution. But in this case, I'm not going to bash on about the issues in our agricultural system. We can probably agree we need to tackle eroding soils, harder climate challenges, and water becoming a scarcer resource. I will briefly talk to each panelist individually to dive a bit deeper into their solution. And then afterwards, we'll do a fire round of questions to see and check in with them on their investment situation and their personal founding situation. Let's start at the base of it, where it all starts with the seed. So we will start with Avalo. And my first question is, achieving drought tolerance and increasing yields is actually very complex because conventional breeding methods take a lot of time and money, and there are so many genes involved in achieving something like increased drought tolerance. A genome-wide association study may find that there are hundreds of genes of interest that could be important for this change. And Brendan, you are able to narrow it down to sometimes up to a dozen. How does your method determine which genes are truly associated with the desired trait?
Yeah, great question. So I think genomics as a whole is really traditionally just like a difficult data problem. And the type of data that you have is, traditionally really tricky in the sense that it's very fat instead of very long. So you have very few individuals, but you're looking at millions of markers across the entire genome. And so to actually deal with that, the statistical tools that you traditionally have are very limited. And so what you have is the GWAS, which is really just like a linear regression at each of those positions in the genome. And so that's why it's really prone to these false positives. So you actually get something like a 2% true discovery rate in a GWAS versus, so you're letting in thousands to several thousands of false positives per true discovery that you get. But there are really good statistical methods out there that can deal with this level of data. And that's really machine learning. These machine learning models are really good at taking in tons and tons of data and being able to make inferences and try and discover what's connected between those different data points across those millions of markers. But traditionally, these machine learning models are black box models, and you can't really understand what they're actually relying on to make their inferences. But luckily, there's been some really, really good researchers recently that have developed new mathematical models to actually be able to probe those machine learning models in really clever ways. And so we're really lucky that one of our scientific advisors, Cynthia Rudin, is one of the originators of this idea of interpretable machine learning. And we're actually the first company to be able to apply interpretable machine learning to the entire genome. And so what that allows us to do is really create a new model that fits the entire genome and all these different data points into this, and then actually probe it in a really clever way to come up with the actual causal basis of each of these traits.
What does this probing actually look like?
Yeah, so what we're actually able to do, and so this is diving a little into actually machine learning theory, but we're able to fit an entire model to the entire genome, and then position by position, we substitute fake data in at that position to actually see how much the output of the model changes. And so if we're going position by position, and we substitute this fake data in, and the model output doesn't change very much, we know that position in the genome really isn't that important to contributing to the output. So a real world example of what we've been working on is we've been designing this broccoli for indoor cultivation. So broccoli traditionally heads in 120 days. It's a really long, not profitable crop for farmers. But what we've been trying to do is develop this variety that will head in under 45 days. So 45 days is really important for indoor farmers because no pest cycle is shorter than 45 days. And so if you can harvest in less than 45 days, then you don't actually have to worry about pests in your system. And so, and days to harvest is also becoming a really important trait as farmers go further north, where seasons are actually much shorter. And so we were able to follow our predictive breeding program in broccoli, and we were actually able to show that we can get 77% more genetic gain per breeding cycle. And so we actually have a variety of broccoli that we've developed that now heads in 41 days.
Let's keep going with Puna Bio. Franco, you've chosen to study what I would call the OGs of the microbes. So the ones that can withstand the hardest conditions and still, as you once mentioned in an interview, not just survive, but actually thrive. How are you using these extremophiles as raw material to produce biofertilizer?
Thank you for the question. Actually, exactly these extremophiles were actually the first inhabitants on the planet when there was no atmosphere that was livable for plants, animals. These extremophiles were the ones that were responsible for creating this atmosphere. There was no ozone layer before. So actually, what happens is that these microbes are very efficient in not only utilizing a few nutrients that are available, but actually making symbiotic relationships with plants in order to help plants use also nutrients in a better way. So what we are doing is using particular strains that we select, isolate, and then formulate in order to create the next generation of biofertilizers and actually some other products such as biocontrol, biofungicides, among others.
But then the extremophiles are just the raw material, right? So what do you actually do with them to get to a biofertilizer? Is it maybe also about which combination of extremophiles you use and what else you add to it?
Actually, it starts way before. It's not only a scaling problem or production problem. It starts with the research. So one of my co-founders spent 20 years investigating the highest and driest desert on Earth, La Puna, between Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia, and understanding. First, you have to understand where do you have to prospect. These are high altitude deserts above 4,000 meters above sea level. Then you have to understand which samples are the most effective in order to get to these new microbes. Once you have that, you go to the lab. And in the lab, you combine both bioinformatics tools, but also biochemical assays in order to assess which ones are the most effective candidates for different crops. Then we go to greenhouse stage. In the greenhouse stage, you start testing the matching. Actually, is this hypothesis that I had from these microbes actually work well when I match them with the crops? Then we go to field trials. Right? We have to test that what we did in control conditions actually reflects in regular farming conditions. And finally, it comes also to developing the formulation around it. Once you have and this happens also in parallel sometimes to the field trials, basically you have to understand how this microbe that you have that might be the best microbe in terms of, for instance, nitrogen fixation or phosphorus solubilization, just to say a couple effects, you have to understand how that microbe can most effectively colonize the roots and make this symbiotic relationship with the plant. This is very tied to growth of this microbe in a formulation in a media. And then you have to understand how to make it shelf stable and how to make it be shelf stable at regular temperatures, not only obviously refrigerated for the economics that would imply. So what we do is the whole process from the prospection, isolation, characterization, testing, and finally developing the formulation in order to create from these microbes, create products. That could be seed treatments, could be foliar applications, or in furrow as well.
So if I understand you correctly, you have these microbes, you maybe have additional inputs in the fertilizer which support the microbes, it's shelf stable, but then how does it relate? Like, how is it compared to nitrogen fertilizer, for example? Do you have to apply it regularly? Is it just a one-off thing? Maybe you can draw some comparisons here.
Perfect. Yeah, so it actually depends. As I mentioned, there are, for instance, seed treatments, which focus on a one-time application at the moment of planting, but we're also working on foliar applications to further sustain the health of the crops during the different stages of the growth. How it compares to nitrogen fertilizers, there are mainly three categories. One is carbon emissions. Nitrogen fertilizers are responsible for about 5% of global carbon emissions. Biofertilizers probably emit, I won't say the exact number, but it's between 98 to 99% less carbon emissions than a regular nitrogen fertilizer. Also, in terms of cost, this is not an area where we expect to have a green premium. Biofertilizers can be not only at cost parity, but can actually lead to 50% cost reduction compared to regular nitrogen fertilizers. We won't replace all of the nitrogen fertilizer right now. I mean, currently the claims of most the leading companies are to replace more or less 20% of the global nitrogen usage at the moment, but that is a huge contribution to reduction in carbon emissions. And finally, there's the question of efficacy. We need to create products that have the same level of efficacy and understanding as the regular nitrogen fertilizer. Right now, we actually waste almost half of the nitrogen fertilizer that is applied to soils, and this is a technology that has been going on for more than 100 years. We're still in the first, let's say, 20 years of biofertilization, and the latest developments in not only AI, but understanding on genomics and the cost reduction that all of these processes have had are creating this wave that is much faster to gain much more information. So I think that actually the biofertilizers will get to the same level of understanding and efficacy levels as the current chemical solutions in much less time.
Yeah, I also was talking recently to people from Bayer, Germany, and they said because in Germany there are a lot of restrictions on traditional pesticide use and fertilizer use, that is the needed push that will drive them towards exploring biofertilizers, which are not yet at the same capacity, but of course, this is something that develops. Super exciting. And also, I just want to point out that if you look at the planetary boundaries by the Stockholm Resilience Center, replacing nitrogen fertilizer in and of itself is one of the most important things that we should do because of the contamination that we have, even apart from the CO2 emissions. But let's talk with Ramadan about Drip.ai. You argue that your Hydropanel is able to absorb the moisture from the air. And the thing that makes it so special is that it is completely passive. So it doesn't need external energy input, fans, and stuff like that. And you argue that it's cheaper than utility prices. So maybe you can contrast a bit further how a classic hydrogen panel works and how your approach is different.
Okay, thank you, Marina, and thanks for the Franco and Collins. So let's talk about the Hydropanel first, or the atmospheric water generator, how it looks like and how it works. Very simple. So it's like a device can pull out the moisture out of the air, then it can give it you as a liquid water. So based on this, based on the technology inside this device, we can classify the technology into like generations. So the first generation of the technology uses the condensation methods, which very simple. When you take a bottle of water out of the fridge, then you can find some droplets of water around it. Then if you have some cold coil inside and you just put some coolant inside, then you pull the air inside, you will take all the water inside the air and convert it into liquid water. But unfortunately, this is a huge consumption energy to produce the water by this method. Second techniques, we can call it like generation 2 or second generation of this technology, that we can use some materials who can harvest the moisture out of the air passively. Then we can combine it with any other heating methods to just take the water back again, and then we can condense it and take it as the water. But still again, also you still need to put the energy back again to just take out all the water you have harvested over the night or period of time. So based on this, there is no choice, because if we understand the water physics, we can see that the water can be exist in three phases. It could be ice as a solid or liquid or a gas. To just move it from one state to another state, you need to put some energy or take out some energy. This energy is a huge. It can cost around 700 watt per 1 kilogram of water, which makes the price for 1 cubic meter of water more than $100. However, you can pay on your home like $1 or $2 or $3 only. So that's why we came in to fill this gap, that we can develop some new device which can take the moisture out of the air with some very smart and novel materials, which able to harvest this moisture out of the air without any energy inputs. And these materials are combined with a very innovative solar system, which can only use the solar power to get back all the water you just absorb over the night. So this is in general how it works and how it's smart.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, like the first phase of these innovations were condensation methods, and the second
Yes.
phase were using materials plus heat to
Yes.
get the water out of the materials. And you have a different kind of material, so you have a material innovation, and you're using solar energy combined, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get to a quick fire round. So there are a lot of questions that I have, and the way that I cram them in is to ask you three to answer with a thumbs up, a yes, somewhat, and a no. And of course, you can use this dial and find anything in between. Okay, we will have 4 company related. Actually, it's statements, because statements are easier for this method.
Okay.
So, regulation is an important issue for our company. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we have 2 for whom it's very important. Our product will be easily accessible to smallholder farmers. 3, 2, 1. Yes. We already have patents on our technology. Go ahead. Oh, really? Wow, cool. Congratulations. The business angle lends itself to developing patents. Of course, yeah. So then some more personal questions. I have noticed that it has become significantly harder to raise money. Semi, yes, okay. I'm more stressed in 2023 than in 2022. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's just so interesting, so insightful. It has become easier for me to find talent. No? Oh, we have a no here. Oh, that's so wildly differing for you. You seem to have very different experiences there. And the last question, due to the economic downturn, I had to adapt my pitching style and strategy significantly. So this is specifically of like how you pitch to investors. Not at all. Semi no. Oh, but Brendan had to. Okay. Brendan, how did you have to adapt your pitching style?
So I think in general, we started to rely more on the business case of like how this is actually going to generate huge numbers and that we're applying this to massive markets, and talk less about the climate outcome that we're working on as well. And so more focus on the business model and go-to-market strategy than just the grand vision of, this is how we solve climate change.
There's also a question of low-hanging fruits that I have, and I'm first going to direct it to Franco. I've researched that you, probably by now more, but back then had already 500 different extremophiles in your research set and database. And I'm wondering whether, because there are so many possibilities for different benefits, what are the benefits that are most easily achievable with extremophiles currently?
Yes, well, that number is outdated. I won't mention the exact number. Is north of several thousands by now.
Wow.
But actually, extremophiles are currently already widely used. Many people won't know, but the PCR test that we use for COVID during the pandemic uses an enzyme that comes from an extremophile from Yellowstone. And they are also widely used in industry because of their capacity to tolerate different levels of pH or temperatures. What we did, and our main innovation, is to be the first ones that are using these types of microbes towards agriculture and towards developing a more sustainable and resilient agriculture. So what I see and what we see in the company as the low-hanging fruits within that space is actually on nutrition. But then we also know that we have lot of opportunity in finding novel genes and novel pathways to develop a lot of different capacities, such as biocontrol, such as biofungicides, not only made out of the bacteria themselves, but actually on the metabolites that the bacteria are using in order to fight these pathogens. So I think that the low-hanging fruit overall is to expand this research, not only obviously on our extremophiles, but overall on novel mechanisms and novel microbes, because sometimes nature already has the solution of the questions and the problems that we're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. You were studying La Puna very in detail. Is there some other kind of strain of microbe, some other phenomenon that you don't have the capacity to work on, but you think there should be much more research or startups looking into something going on there?
So we started in La Puna region, but actually we have done prospections in different countries and places. These are called kind of biodiversity hotspots, and there are different biodiversity hotspots. For instance, sometimes you want to tackle soil remediation, like mining, for instance, and you can go to places, for instance, volcanic areas, where the presence of heavy metals is actually huge, and there are microbes that have to survive on those really hard conditions and have to actually recycle these polluted or these contaminants. So there are actually a lot of value on basically exploring these biodiversity hotspots and finding applications in terms of soil remediation, in terms of antibiotics, in terms of cosmetics or pharma industry, can learn a lot from, again, solutions that nature has already developed.
Yeah, so exciting. Well, to round it off, maybe you have requests for the investors listening, something that you would wish them to recognize or be aware of. That's your chance from founder to investor to give a little hint.
I just say that we have all seen the reports on the overall VC industry, and we all are well aware of the macroeconomic conditions. I'm absolutely all in for rationalizing investments and making things that will have a real impact and will create real businesses. The solutions that will really change the world will necessarily have to make a lot of money at the same time, because if not, we're not going to reach the impact that we want. So my ask is actually to take this into account and say that we don't have much time to really solve the effects that we're bringing to the world, to really solve and try to get the main solutions for climate change. So I don't think this is now a time to back off and start slowing down investments. Actually, I think that it would be a smart to, all the contrary, push more, because the solutions will be more and more needed. And maybe at the time that they are needed, you will say, oh, I wish I had started investing on this a couple of years ago. So my goal is to really not slow down, there's still a huge opportunity ahead.
Mm-hmm. Brendan, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with Franco. Like, keep investing in deep tech. I think there's this fear that a lot of deep tech solutions got a lot of investment, but in this tougher funding environment, that's gonna trickle down, and a lot of really promising technologies are going to stall out because of that. So keep investing in deep tech, and there will be huge payoffs as we go into this climate future.
And Ramadan, if you also want to add some closing thoughts.
Yeah, for the VCs, I think if we have one solution now, definitely we have lost thousands because of late investments, like not on time investments. We have many great founders. We just need to link the people together and just to encourage the young people to come by the crazy ideas to solve our nowadays problems.
Unfortunately, we will have to wrap up. Thank you so much, all you three, Ramadan, Brendan, Franco, for sharing and for working on topics which are so important for our future food. Adaptive agriculture is not just a hot trend, it is an absolute necessity for the increasing extreme weather events that we will be facing. So with that, let's get back to the rest of the program. Thank you so much, everybody.